All right, it's everyone's favorite NBA topic. No, not the chase for the NBA championship and the Larry O'Brien trophy. The chase for the number one pick and the best lottery odds, where this season, roughly a third of the NBA wants to lose over the final 2 months of the season. Because of that epidemic, the NBA, Adam Silver's office, have reportedly started looking into ideas that they could implement as soon as next season to try to curb the tanking epidemic. So according to Shams Charania, some of those ideas include only allowing first-round picks to be protected in the top 4 or top 14 plus, as opposed to the mid to late lottery protections that see teams tank out of playoff positions to try to keep their picks. Lottery odds freeze at the deadline or a later date, no longer allowing a team to pick top 4 in consecutive years. Teams can't pick top 4 the year after making conference finals. Lottery odds allocated based on 2-year records instead of 1 year. Including all play-in teams, regardless of whether they win or not in the lottery, and also flattening the odds for all lottery teams. A bunch of options there. Scott, whether it's one of those options, something you've created in your own sick mind, what is your favorite idea to stem this tide of NBA tanking?
Okay, so I won't say this is a wholly original idea, but it's definitely an amalgamation of a couple ideas. So I like the idea of flattening the odds for all the lottery teams. Let's just make it all equal. That way there's no battle for, first, second. Like, you really don't have to be. We're not going to see this terrible basketball. However, you don't want someone trying to tank out of a playoff spot, which is also like an unintended consequence. So my pitch here is that the 2 teams that finish in 8th after the play-in will be included in the lottery and also get increased lottery odds. So a couple extra ping pong balls. So they would actually have the 2 best chances at winning the lottery. I'm not talking something super significant, but just a little edge so that there's still a competitive, nature to the end of the season.
I love the creativity.
Thank you.
Obviously, the critique, which you have already brought up, once you start flattening the odds, is that you're kind of incentivizing the mediocre teams to try to be worse than they are, which some would argue is the problem this season, is that it's not that there's so many bad teams, is that even the decent teams are being artificially bad. I like the idea of it still providing some incentive for if you're in the play-in to win. My only thing would be, do you end up in a situation where
Yes.
teams try to game the system where it's like they want to be in the 8-9 playing in the, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
because if you're the 7, you can't get the extra. Do you get what I'm
Yes,
saying?
I understand what you're saying. I think the defense against that is that's kind of absurd. I just think
I agree it's absurd. I would say
would not
don't
put it past teams.
don't put anything past
100%.
teams.
Yes, 100%. I'm open to some wiggle room here. I'm not locked in. If we want to include some of the other play-in teams there and kind of make that so that you're not, maybe it's like the 7th and the guys that finish 7th and 8th get it. I think I'm just hoping that once you're on the cusp of an actual playoff spot, we're not tanking through, seeding. But we've seen it before.
JB, as someone who's coached, assistant coach in the NBA, coached overseas, I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to assume that your idea completely takes away the need for teams and coaches to try to lose games.
I think I would love to see it completely disconnected from record. And I think it's unconventional for us and feels uncomfortable because that's what we know. But that doesn't mean it's not the solution. I'm a big fan of Mike Zarin's of the Boston Celtics assistant GM, I think, the wheel, where you're in a 5-year cycle. And every 5 years you have a pick that's 1 through 6 or 7 through 13, whatever, right? I think I like that more because whatever you do, you say, oh, there's a possibility, maybe it's not 100% that somebody wouldn't, try to game the system. They will. 100% they will. Yeah. So if you make it just the 8th, then people will try to get into the 8th. It'll affect the 7th. If you make it the 7th and 8th, then people in the 6 through 4 region will try and get into that space. Just think of the example of you've got a guy out on a very good team and they fall into 4 and they could get into 6 through 7, then all of a sudden you might have your best 2 teams in the playoffs facing in the first round because the second seed is legit, and the 7th seed has a guy who's been hurt most of the year. He's coming back. They were anticipated to be a top seed, and now they're the 7th or 8th seed because they've intentionally lost games or held guys out longer. So I think remove that completely. And I also think it's better for front offices and coaching dynamics too, because regardless of whether you are a coach or a player, no one wants to lose.
Right.
So you can say like, oh yeah, just tank, it's easy. Players do not want to look bad. Coaches don't want to look bad. And so being able to have more, I want to say synergy between the front office and the coaching staffs, you're going to end up with better basketball overall, because you're not going to have these disputes about whether or not we should be intentionally losing games or not, or developing talent more, because those disputes cause people to lose their jobs. And if people are losing their jobs more often, both in the front office and the coaching staffs, you're going to have more completely new situations. Completely new situations usually breed bad basketball.
I think I like the randomization component that comes with the wheel. And I think generally randomizing things so that it's not tied to team performance is probably the healthiest thing for the league. I think the issue that you'd run into is, like for example, this year, if the Thunder had end up with the top pick because the Clippers stink, even though that would, kill a lot of people and people would be pissed about it, they would still understand it from the perspective of like, well, hey, they made that trade, all's fair here. Whereas if it was because of a wheel situation or some random thing where it's like you get this pick every so many years, and then a juggernaut at the time adds a pick because it's like, well, it's just their turn to kind of get that, I think that's where the issue might arise. But I do wonder if there's like a hybrid way you can incorporate something like the wheel or randomly assign draft positions while still maybe utilizing some of these new ideas where it's like, okay, so we're using the wheel or some randomized thing. However, if you perform this well in a year, you're in this bracket, maybe you move down. Like, I don't know, something along those lines. Again, I guess that could still lead to some form of tanking that the league doesn't want to put up with. But
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, yeah, I just would be interested to see, like, you run this for 5 years. Like, how many times does, like, an elite team end up with an elite player, and what are the unintended consequences? Because I feel like the league has fought so hard on this, like, having teams be too stacked. Like, they had the whole cap spike. Yeah. They created a whole new CBA that basically makes it impossible to keep multiple, people of your stars, or multiple stars on your team. So I'd be interested to, like, it just seems like the league would be really, the first time an elite team like the Thunder lands the number one pick.
Just because it's their turn.
It's like, are we then in this huge crisis where it's like we're talking about that the same way we're talking about the crisis of tanking now, Like, I think it's helpful for the overall integrity of the league, and maybe, honestly, like, that's all that matters, and you're just kind of like, well, now we're not talking about tanking anymore. Like, tough shit. Okay, so you got the first pick, whatever.
I just think, like, when you see teams consistently in the lottery over and over again, and people talk about hope for those teams. Okay, you can hope that you get a good pick. You also have to hope that they make the right selection.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a big believer in that. It's like, okay, like, let's put the onus on teams to evaluate and select talent effectively. Elite teams end up with elite players because they're elite at evaluating, not just because they've locked into it, right? So you could end up with a top 6 pick. If you make the wrong selection, then that's on you. And then when it comes to, like, salary structures, if you're automatically in the top 6 or bottom 6 of the first round, you are already locked into a rookie scale deal. So I think that does help with planning purposes and being able to keep some teams together.
Totally.
Versus being able to, like, have a ton of draft equity and it ends up all in the high in the first round, and then it's like, actually, we can't pay all these guys.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a bit of a downer here in that I actually am not advocating for any kind of radical change. I think I agree that it's a problem when a third of the league is trying to lose. And I think that the NBA has to accept tanking on some level, because if they want to try to keep it where the worst teams get, have some, not incentive, if the worst teams have some sort of help on the way or be able to sell hope like that, that's fine. And basketball, more than any other sport, is very susceptible and vulnerable to the whims of one star player, right? Just because of the nature of the game, with that player being able to play as much as they, as many minutes of the game and have the ball in their hands as opposed to other sports. What I think they have to do, though, is just disincentivize the most shameless forms of tanking. And so my idea, and it's something I've been railing on for years, and I am genuinely shocked that it somehow has not come up in all these years of the NBA trying to find tweaks and solutions, is eliminate the lottery floor. And what I mean by that is right now, the lottery is for the 14 non-playoff teams. However, the lottery itself only draws 4 teams. It draws the top 4 teams. And because of that, you cannot drop more than 4 spots from your lottery. So if you finish with the worst record, you're guaranteed a top 5 pick. If you have a protected pick that you owe, say top 6 protected, whatever, going into the year exactly how bad you need to be to guarantee that you keep that pick. Why not actually draw all 14 picks using the lottery? Don't adjust the odds. So your worst teams can have the exact same odds they have right now, and your best non-playoff team has the exact same small odds they have right now. The only thing that would change is every team in the lottery could finish anywhere from 1st to 14th. So the teams that are right now punting entire seasons to guarantee themselves, even if they don't get the number 1 pick, guarantee themselves a certain pick, would those teams be as eager to throw away entire seasons, risk the revenue that comes with it, if they know that they could do that and still get the 13th pick? I'm not convinced.
I'll just go back to what you said, and it's if teams are incentivized to lose, they're going to lose. I think you're perhaps we're not sitting here talking about this in friggin' February, but I do think if there's no floor, teams are just honestly, that might incentivize teams to be even worse because you're just.
But again, the odds aren't changing. The odds aren't changing.
Okay, but you'd still want to be in the bottom. What is it? The bottom 4 have the same odds.
Bottom 3, bottom 4. Yeah.
Yeah, then that honestly, then it's all of a sudden it's more important to even be in the bottom 3 because then you get
the best odds of the number 1 pick.
Right.
But the floor is gone. So you could be, the 6th worst team or the 2nd worst team no longer knows they're getting a top 6
pick. They could pick 12 for sure. No, I agree. But still, then that fight for the bottom 3 is even hard because you're now I need these odds because I could end up anywhere. Anywhere.
I just think, you can find talent anywhere. And I think the Suns, for example, I think a lot of people coming into the season were like, man, this is going to be a long time. They've got to recoup a lot of assets. Well, you do, but you can be competitive pretty quickly with the right acquisitions that aren't found in the top 15 picks. And competent coaching and just playing hard, honestly. Mm-hmm. And so maybe that's easier to do right now because a lot of teams are trying to lose. Mm-hmm. But I think if you removed the making any incentive to lose, I still think that's something that is possible.
It would be fascinating to see a basketball season where everybody is just trying to win from the jump.
You know what? You might see that the next 2 years because dirty little secret, after what's looking like one of the historically great classes coming up, the 2027 and 2028 draft classes, I know we're far out, but are projected to be a lot weaker. They're not necessarily on the record, but there have been executives quoted in stories of talking about how weak the 2027 and 2028 classes are. So I think it's possible that organically the tanking situation might have calmed down over the next 2 years. Not completely, but to the point where we're not going to see a third of the league tanking. I think it's up to the league now to make sure that reprieve lasts longer than 2 years.
I think that's a great point too because this season and last season are, I think, historically speaking, very strong drafts, and I think the tanking has been especially bad the last 2 years. So to your point, it'll be interesting to see if that changes at all now that the draft classes are not as strong.